then that would certainly justify genetically modifying taro, because then you would be targeting the indigenous people of Hawaii. And one of the favorite practices of the City of London bankers and the Wall Street bankers, and we know this from smallpox being put in American Indian blankets to kill off the Native Americans, extermination is what they practice every day. And in the United States, the national policy has been for a number of decades to ship all the radioactive contaminated milk, the most contaminated milk, into black inner-city communities. And that explains why Africa has the lowest diabetes rates in the world, because diabetes has been linked very strongly to radiation exposure since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Chernobyl, nuclear power plants, atmospheric testing. Why would black African Americans in the United States have the highest diabetes rates almost in the world, and yet in Africa they have the lowest? Well, it can't be explained by genetics, which is what the government says, because if you have an epidemic, it's not genetics. So there are many, many applications for the HAARP system, and it can be used on any scale. They can target the cell energy in people, and they can manipulate cell functioning and cause disease, impose disease. It can be used at any scale, all the way into the atmosphere, where they're heating up the atmosphere and causing it to rise and expand, and then it collapses, and that is sort of a compression wave that can trigger an earthquake. So it's a very integrated system with ground-based technologies, air-based technologies, and space-based technologies. It's very, very complex. But let's go on to the next example after Hurricane Katrina, and that would be the Sumatra earthquake on December 26, 2006, which is Boxing Day in the British culture. And Boxing Day is the day after Christmas, when people love to go on fox hunts, and people on Boxing Day, a lot who celebrate Boxing Day that way, usually don't even care about Christmas. They're too excited about the Boxing Day hunt or other activities. Now, with the Sumatra earthquake, which was a 7.6 and occurred at 8:23 p.m., I was very suspicious. I thought this was definitely a man-made or a human-triggered earthquake, and I knew that whole earthquake region was very unstable. It was long overdue for a major earthquake. So I asked Dr. Rosalie Bertell, who's a very famous radiation scientist, as well as having served on many scientific advisory boards in Congress when HAARP was being developed. Of course, they weren't told what the real application was. But she wrote an excellent book called Planet Earth, The Latest Weapon of War, and you can order it on Amazon. I recommend that people read that. It's very well written and very informative. And I said, Dr. Bertell, how can you tell the difference between a man-made earthquake and a natural earthquake? And she said, well, it's quite simple. With natural earthquakes, the seismic waves that are produced can go through the solid part of the earth and be detected on the opposite side, or whatever layer they bounce off of, but they can be detected and measured on a seismograph when they come back up to the surface. And the earth is like an onion with all these layers that are different densities and temperatures and composition, and so the waves bounce off these different surfaces, and that's actually the only way we know to figure out what's going on inside the earth. There's no other way to find out. So she said the scalar waves that are produced by HAARP are not natural waves, and she said natural seismic waves will not go through liquids. Now, the core of the earth has a solid center, but then it has an extensive liquid phase around it, and then you get the more solid mantle with the continents floating on that. And she said scalar waves go right through the core of the Earth, the liquid phase, which natural seismic waves cannot transmit through liquids. So if you stuck a pin in the earthquake zone at the epicenter and stuck that pin right through the center of the Earth, where it comes out on the opposite side of the Earth is where you would find the scalar waves recorded on a seismograph. If it was a natural earthquake, you would not detect the seismic waves. So it's actually a very simple way to determine, and you can bet scientists all over the world and the military all over the world are watching this new kind of war, and they're certainly studying each other, and it's just the same game all over again. It's instead of nuclear blackmail, it's scalar blackmail or HAARP blackmail. And this seismologist also told me that the Sumatra earthquake was triggered, number one, to get control of vast oil supplies and resources on the island of Sumatra, which has been prevented for the last 20 or 30 years because there were warring factions. There was guerrilla warfare, making it far too dangerous to do any exploration on Sumatra. But another application, Alfred, is that that's where the Straits of Malacca and Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, all those countries, and that water corridor there is where all of the ships carrying the energy, the petroleum and natural gas from the Middle East to the Asian countries must pass through that region. And so just like the earthquake in Kobe, this one was also triggered to establish a seismic network in the Indian Ocean, specifically in the routes where the petroleum traffic, the ships would be traveling. And I have no doubt whatsoever, since a Navy ship was sitting offshore from Sumatra when it happened, and about a week later, a U.S. nuclear submarine limped into Guam with the whole front of the nuclear submarine smashed in, and they had this silly excuse that they had run into an underwater mountain. Well, they had very sophisticated sonar equipment, as well as all kinds of satellite and every other kind of ability to detect obstacles in their path. And if that was true, a lot of other submarines would have run into underwater mountains. So that was definitely a suspect HAARP event. And then the NASA shuttles, 2 of them have crashed. A physicist told me when the first one crashed that was deliberately done. I was just astounded when he told me that. And I said, why? And he said, well, it's to take the civilian participation out of the space program. The military is taking it over. And indeed, today, Alfred, the Navy is the supreme military all over the world. They're always supreme because their job began with commerce, and commerce happened on the high seas mostly. So they've always had the best military intelligence, and they've been the premier branch of the military in every country, almost every country. But, of course, it's all tied to water, to money. And other types of events have been, it's getting to be more common, more frequent now. On July 17th, 2007, a 6.8 earthquake occurred in Japan at Niigata, at the nuclear power plant there. That was at 10:13 a.m. And what is really alarming is that it damaged the nuclear power plant, which leaked. Japan is the size of the state of California. We only have 2 nuclear power plants in California. Japan is over 55. And it's extremely dangerous because Japan has a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake every 5 years. And I wrote a great article for the Japan Times. It's called Japan's Deadly Game of Nuclear Roulette. It came out in 2004, and it's very, very informative. They still have it on their website. And the reason Japan is so dangerous for earthquakes is that it's in a subduction zone. In other words, Japan is diving under the China plate, and it's being pushed from the east towards China by the Pacific plate, the Pacific plate, and then the North American plate is pushing from the top, from the north downward. And then the Philippine plate is pushing north from the Philippines under Japan, and then the China plate is to the east. So of all places to be, Japan is sitting on the junction of four major tectonic plates, and it's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Why they would build 55 nuclear power plants there, it has to be a very demonic reason, and I believe it's for the same reason they built so many in the U.S. and Europe, and it's to depopulate and destroy first-level nations in order to maximize profits and concentrate wealth upwards. Well, who's doing this? Who are those London bankers? In 1920, Churchill, on February 8th, published an article in the Illustrated Sunday Herald in London, and he was the first to say international Jew. Churchill's suppressed article indicting the international Jew re-emerges on the Internet. On the above date, Winston Churchill penned a since-suppressed article, Zionism versus Bolshevism, in which he wrote, quote, "The Jewish Bolsheviks are producing a philosophy as malevolent as Christianity is benevolent, which, if not arrested, will shatter irretrievably all that Christianity has rendered possible. And Alfred, indeed, Christianity and even the world of Islam, the religion of Islam, are two major targets of this malevolence, and HAARP is the delivery system."
Well, I just have to jump in here because I know the policies of Co-op Radio. When you refer to Zionism, you're not referring to Judaism or any religion. You are referring to a political philosophy.
Is
that correct?
That's
political ideology. I really want to clarify that.
Yes, it has absolutely nothing to do with any religion whatsoever. It has to do with money. It's an economic, malevolent, global...
So when you're using the term international Jew here, because I just want to be very, very clear about this, because of the laws here in Canada regarding hate speech, that you're using that as a term of art to refer to Zionists.
Well, I'm actually quoting Prime Minister Churchill.
I understand, but we're dealing with particular hate laws here in Canada.
Well, what he meant was the Zionists.
Yes, okay, but I just really want to clarify that for the benefit of the Canadian law.
Yes.
And the CRTC and the listeners.
Of course, and this is not in any way meant to denigrate any person of any faith, of any religion, of any country, or socioeconomic
because, in fact, there are many, many Zionists who are of many different faiths and of no faith.
That's right.
There are Christian Zionists, Catholic Zionists.
That's right. And Churchill goes on to say about the Zionists that they have forsaken the faith of their forefathers.